Hello, good morning. I hope wherever you are, you're doing fine. My name is Judith Kwambuka. I am the convener of the 8-week study challenge for the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act of 2015. So we started our challenge last week on 18th September. And in this video, I would like to bring to you a summary of what we covered. This is going to be covered in two parts. We're going to have part one, which is covering actually part one of the Act from section 1 to section 6. Then I'll do another video covering part 2, which takes care of section 7 all the way to section 32. So even as we start, I hope you are on the study. I hope you're up to date. And even if you're not up to date, you can start anytime with the study guide that you already have. So allow me to go straight to the presentation. So as earlier shared, in week 1, we were to cover part 1 and part 2, running from section 1 all the way to section 32. Part 1 is about preliminaries. What is found in preliminaries? Preliminaries takes care of section 1 to section 6 of the Act. Within it, you will have a short title of the Act, you will have interpretation of terms, you have guiding principles and values, you have application of the Act and conflict with the Act. I'm going to take you through one by one for ease of understanding. So section 1, it basically gives you the short title of the Act, how it is referred to. It is cited as the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act, 2015. Then section 2, now we go to interpretation of terms. Here, very many terms and terminologies have been listed alongside their meanings. So this section gives meaning to various terminologies that are used in the Act. There's so many, I can't list all of them in this presentation, but I'm sure if you went through this section, you were able to see them. Definition of assets, appeals, authority, contract administration. When the Act talks of disadvantaged groups, what is it? When we talk about financial year, what is it? Consultancy services. When you see a term preference, what does it mean? Procuring agent, what does it mean? And many, many more. When we talk of woman, youth, user department, among others, what do they actually mean? So this section has defined those terms, has given you a description of what those terms mean. Remember, earlier on, I have said that the intention of doing this study is not to cram, but it's so as to make you very familiar and to enable you understand and interpret the Act even on your own. So even as you're looking at these various terminologies of the Act, your intention should not be to cram them, but to have an understanding. And in the event that you don't have an understanding, at least now you know that within the Act, there has been provided for a section where various terms have been described. So in relation to this, I am interested in what is it that the Act has defined as a public entity. Remember, this Act applies to public entities. What are they? They include the national government or any organ or department of the national government, a county government or any organ or department of the county government, the judiciary and the courts, the commissions established under the Constitution, independent offices established under the Constitution, state corporations within the meaning of the State Corporation Act, the central bank, a public school. Yes, public schools, they fall under public entities within the meaning of the Basic Education Act of 2013, a public university, a city or urban area established under the Urban Areas and Cities Act of 2011, a company owned by a public entity. A company owned by a public entity, a county service delivery coordination unit under the National Government Coordination Act 2013, a constituency, a Kenyan diplomatic mission under the State Department responsible for foreign affairs. Yes, diplomatic mission offices. They fall under public entities. Pension funds for public entities, a body that uses public assets in any form of contractual undertaking, including public-private partnerships, a body in which the national or county government has controlling interest, a college or other educational institution maintained or assisted out of public funds. Then we have an entity described as a public entity. Excuse me. Sorry. Excuse me. A public entity prescribed as a public entity for the purpose of this paragraph, or any other entity or a prescribed class of public entities or particular entities that uses public money for purposes of procurement, or any other entity as declared under Section 4 or 5 of the Public Finance Management Act of 2012. So it is good that we have clarity on where this act is applicable. So after this, we're going to look at Section 3. You studied it, Section 3 of Part 1. Here, you are looking at the guiding principles. What are the various values, principles of the Constitution and other legislations that guide public procurement and asset disposal? Procurement and asset disposal doesn't occur in isolation. There are other factors, there are other legislations, there are other principles of the Constitution or other laws which affect the manner in which procurement is carried out. And this was, as you went through the study, this was covered in Section 3. They include the national values and principles under Article 10. I hope you're familiar or you took time to find out what is this Article 10. But in brief, Article 10 talks about patriotism. It talks about human dignity, good governance, and sustainable development. You can refer to it to get more details. Procurement and asset disposal is also guided by Article 27, which in essence talks about equality and freedom from discrimination. So it means the manner in which procurement and asset disposal activities are carried out should ensure equality and freedom from discrimination. It basically means that everybody is equal before the law and has a right to equal protection and equal benefit of the law. So if there's any benefit arising from public procurement and asset disposal, it should be done with Article 27 in mind, that there is equality and there's freedom from discrimination. There's so many other guiding principles and values, which I believe you went through. I am not able to list all of them in this presentation, but I can read some out. There's the one of affirmative action, which is provided for by Article 55 and Article 56, where we have to give opportunities to minorities and marginalized groups. There's the principle of integrity under the Leadership and Integrity Act of 2012. So that also affects procurement. The principle of public finance under Article 201, where there should be equitable sharing of revenues to both national and county governments. We talk of values and principles of public service as provided by under Article 232. You being a government employee, you must be familiar with this Article 232. And if you're not, please go and refer to it. Then we talk of maximization of value of money, promotion of local industry, sustainable development and protection of the environment, and promotion of citizen contractors. So those are some of the values and principles that affect the way you carry out procurement and asset disposal activities. So within part 1, you also looked at section 4. Section 4 talks about the application of the Act. As earlier said, this Act applies to all state organs and public entities. But where does it apply? It doesn't apply in everything. It applies to procurement planning. So this Act will guide a state organ or a public entity in regards to procurement planning, procurement processing, inventory, and asset management. We talk of disposal of assets and contract management. While we are at section 4, part 2, it talks about what is not considered as procurement under this Act. They include retention of services of an individual for a limited term. Even providing those services, the individual works primarily as though he or she was an employee. But that does not apply to persons who are under contract of service. Then what else is not considered as a procurement is transfer of assets being disposed of by one state organ or public entity to another state organ. Remember, there's that method of disposal where you are allowed to transfer to another state organ. Another scenario where which is not considered as a procurement or an asset disposal with respect to this Act is acquiring of services provided by government or government department. Another one is acquisition and sale of shares or securities, physical agency by a public entity, investments such as shares purchased by cooperative society, state corporations, and other public entities. Then section 5, we talk about conflict with other acts. As you would be going through various legislations that talk about procurement or refer to procurement, you're advised under section 5 that this Act prevails in case of any inconsistency between the Act and any other legislation, government circulars, or notices. Even when it comes to the public procurement and asset disposal regulations of 2020, if you find that a regulation is conflicting with what has been said in the Act, what is in the Act takes precedence. So this is the case except where procurement of professional services is governed by an Act of Parliament, which is applicable for such services. Then section 6, we talk about conflict with international agreements. International agreements, Kenya is bound to get into agreements or into treaties so as to fulfill certain obligations. Case in point, sometimes we get funding from World Bank, can get funding from African Development Bank, maybe to develop a road or to build a hospital. So we are told that where any obligations of this Act conflicts with any obligation of the government arising from treaties or agreement of which Kenya is party to, the terms of the treaty or agreement shall prevail. Kenya has, for instance, if Kenya gets funding by World Bank, a credit by World Bank to do a road or to do a mega project, World Bank will have some terms and conditions in relation to that funding. In such a scenario, and we're even told that the borrower is a slave to the lender. In this case, where the government borrows, it abides with the terms and conditions of the government, or sorry, of the agreement or of the treaty. You cannot start imposing Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act requirements on a project that is funded by World Bank. But if the government is to contribute some resources towards achievement of that obligation, if one of the roles that the Kenyan government must do is to provide some resources, some materials, then when they are acquiring those materials or buying those materials, then they must use this act. I hope that is clear. So that marks the end of part 1 of the act. And if you have any questions, please go down there to the channel, the comment questions, give your comments, raise your questions, and members in the group, I encourage you to go there and give your contributions and ask questions so that we're able to learn from each other. Thank you very much.